Space and the existence of life in the world outside of our atmosphere has always been a topic of curiosity for the entire humankind, and while chasing that probability, not only have we searched the moon, but we've never hesitated to look on the other planets too. However, have you ever stopped to wonder when and where this journey started? And now that you're already familiar with the journey of space exploration, you've heard about NASA's Artemis mission, or do you want to know everything about it? If your answer is yes again, then you've come to the right place. Stay with me till the end of this video and you'll be getting all the answers to your questions regarding Artemis, and before we move on, please subscribe and press the bell icon to get an update every time I upload a new video. Now let's start. We will go in further details, but first let me tell you what NASA Artemis mission is all about. It is actually a new series of ongoing missions which aim to land the first woman and first person of color on the moon. The mission hopes to lay the foundation for future aspirations to send astronauts to Mars, as well as to explore the surface of the moon. So as I've mentioned earlier, Artemis is the name given to a series of missions run by NASA named aptly after the Greek goddess of nature, childbirth, and the moon, who's also a twin sister to Apollo, the sun god. It is also quite fitting as the most recent moon landing mission by NASA was named Apollo 17. I'm sure you must be curious about how many steps the mission will be carried out in. Well, the first three Artemis missions are ongoing, the first one being Artemis 1, which will consist of a test flight to orbit the moon without a crew. Artemis 1 was successfully deployed from the Kennedy Space Center at 1:47 a.m. EST, that is 6:47 a.m. GMT on November 16th, after 4 failed attempts because of mechanical failures in the engine and tropical storms. Well, apparently fifth time's the charm. After the completion of this step, a crewed flight beyond the moon is part of the plans for Artemis 2, which will mark the farthest point that humans have ever ventured into space. Artemis 3 shall be the first crewed moon landing mission launched by NASA in the last 50 years after Apollo 17, which was launched in 1972. Artemis 3 will accomplish the previously mentioned goal of the first moon landing by a female astronaut, as well as an astronaut of color who would then dedicate a week to scientific studies on the surface of the moon. I'll give you a sneak peek to these studies, including sampling water, ice, which was first detected on the moon in 1971. The primary focus of the American Space Agency is on Artemis 1, 2, and 3. Although future projects are also under development, reportedly contracts for boosters on rocket up to Artemis 13 have already been finalized by NASA. If there's still doubt about why NASA is putting in so much time, money, and effort into a moon mission when man has already landed on the moon decades ago, then let me tell you that the Artemis mission is so much more than repeating what the Apollo mission has already achieved. In fact, this is a step beyond the previous mission by going to the moon and staying there in order to ascertain how suitable the lunar orbit and surface would be for hosting bases. These habitable bases would be useful in future missions, as the technology and research would then be used to take humans to the Mars next. Within the short term, the goal is for humans to return to the moon by 2025. This date is still tentative though, and the initial target that NASA had for humans to land on the lunar surface was 2024, but the date was shifted a year later in November 2021. The success of the Artemis mission will not only strengthen NASA's stand for racial and gender equality, but it'll also bring about significant technological advancement thanks to being the first instance of a large-scale collaborations with commercial companies such as SpaceX and Boeing. Artemis also hopes to extend the period of stay on the lunar surface to a week and then a month from 3 days as achieved by the latest Apollo mission. This will allow us to gather more knowledge about it, as NASA claims that thanks to advancement in technology, samples will be collected and brought back more carefully this time. Both scientific and commercial investigation and exploitation are possible as a result of the detection of water on the moon and probable deposit of rare minerals. Now that we've mapped out NASA's objectives for this mission, let's take a more detailed look at Artemis 1, 2, and 3. The first step, Artemis 1, is an unmanned mission, although it's carrying the Shaun the Sheep and Snoopy. It was earlier referred to as Exploration Mission 1 and will act as a thorough test of the Space Launch System (SLS) and the Orion module. Speaking of the Space Launch System, you'd be thrilled to know that it's the most powerful rocket ever constructed, and upon launch it can generate a thrust of 8.8 million pounds. It even beats the Saturn V rocket used in the Apollo missions by a solid 1.3 million pounds, or in other words, by a 15% increase in performance. It accomplishes this feat with a 322-foot build, and that makes it even taller than the Statue of Liberty. As you must have guessed, the launcher is a rather big deal, and its development has taken around a decade, after several setbacks and escalating expenses. The other element of Artemis 1, the Orion Command Module, is the name chosen for the crewed spacecraft. The name had been chosen after the most popular constellation, Orion, which in turn was named after the skilled hunter Orion, who was famed as Artemis's hunting companion. It is equipped with shuttle interfaces and a number of science and technology experiments that'll take place in deep space. These experiments have specifically been designed to facilitate the expansion of our knowledge about the moon, as well as deep space radiation. Along with this, the module contains life support systems and 3 Moonikins. What are these Moonikins now? Well, they're mannequins clad in the first generation Orion Crew Survival System spacesuit. The special spacesuits designed for the real astronauts that'll board Artemis 2 and 3. The purpose of these spacesuited Moonikins is to collect data on what human crew members may experience in flight by means of sensors that have been fitted all over them. The planned journey will have Artemis 1 cover its first 450,000 kilometers and reach the moon in orbit 400 kilometers above surface. After this, it'll go beyond the moon almost 64,000 1,373 kilometers into deep space, farther than any human has before. This entire journey is supposed to take around 25 days and a half, and the module is scheduled to return on 11th December by splashing down in the Pacific Ocean near California. Once this has been accomplished, the 4-person crew of Artemis 2 will fly the Orion module 7,402 kilometers beyond the far side of the moon after being propelled into space by the SLS rocket, complete a lunar flyby, and then come back to Earth. The mission will gather important flight test data over the course of 8 to 10 days. The new Artemis team was unveiled in December 2020 after NASA launched a recruiting campaign for new astronauts who will be responsible for bringing humans to the moon and beyond. As a part of Artemis 3, the astronauts on board the Orion module will continue the legacy of the Artemis 2 mission by locking with the Lunar Gateway and spending 30 days in space. As a versatile launch pad for missions to the moon and beyond, the Lunar Gateway is a small space station circling the moon. NASA is collaborating with international organizations like the European Space Agency on the architecture of the Lunar Gateway. This description might have raised another question. How is the Lunar Gateway different from the International Space Station? Well, the Lunar Gateway is not meant to be permanently occupied, but rather to serve as a platform where astronauts can live and undertake research for short periods. And the research can be carried on between human lunar missions as well. The 2 astronauts will then be transported by landing module to the south pole of the moon, a location that's never been explored by humans. The aforementioned landing module, also referred to as the lunar landing vehicles, will transport people and freight from the Lunar Gateway to the moon's surface. In order to develop a human landing system, also known as HLS, and a number of other robotic and cargo vehicles, NASA is collaborating with private companies. This is because the landing systems that will be developed for Artemis missions shall then be used for future missions as well, unlike Apollo's lunar module that was supposed to be used for one return journey only. We'll have to wait as further Artemis missions are unveiled, but let's consider for a moment how realistic does the man on Mars goal seem right now. We know that it takes 3 days to reach the moon, but reaching Mars would be significantly lengthier due to the distance. Not only this, but the journey would be much more complicated. However, NASA is hopeful that Artemis would pave the way for international space agencies and private companies to build a lunar settlement and economy, which would facilitate the journey of humans to Mars. That's all for today. Thanks for watching till the end. Leave me a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to my channel for more such content.